Well, howdy, everybody, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here tonight. I wish it was under better circumstances, but I'm glad we're here together in the spirit of community and solidarity as we wrap our heads around and really wrap our hearts around the election returns and begin to chart a path forward for how our organization, how our whole movement can continue to protect clean air, clean water, a stable climate, and everyone's rights to enjoy and access nature. My name is Jason Mark. I'm the editor of Sierra Magazine, and I'll be the host tonight for this conversation with Sierra Club leaders. Throughout this evening, we're going to be using an online tool called StreamYard, in which we're going to use as the comment section for the conversation. So we'd like you to test it out now. So maybe if you could drop in your hometown, wherever you're dialing in from. I myself, I'm coming to you from Bellingham, Washington. That's the traditional homelands of the Nooksack and Lummi peoples. Before we introduce our speakers, just want to say a little bit more about the technology. This is a live stream town hall, which means that you can hear all of us, but we can't hear you. And the best way, again, to communicate with us is to put your questions into the comments field that you see. We're going to get to as many questions as we can tonight. We want to have a really vibrant conversation. Obviously, we're not going to get to all of them, but we'll do our best. One thing I do want to make clear and just level set on is we really want to make sure we have a spirit of respect and cooperation for this whole discussion. So please, no harassment, no bullying in the comments or in the questions that we respond to. Okay. So obviously the election did not go as well as those of us who care about preserving a livable climate would have liked. I know a lot of us are still reeling and we're still coming to terms with what it all means. I think the one thing to keep in mind is that we've been here before, not only the whole country, but the Sierra Club, we've been here before 8 years ago when Trump was elected the first time. And in many ways, we're prepared much better for this possibility than we were 8 years ago. We have a head start this time with a strong plan involving some down ballot successes that Sarah Burton, our national political director, will talk to you about, local and regional wins. We've got a sand in the gears political strategy to prevent the worst destructive actions from the Trump administration. And we've got an amazing legal team. You'll hear from Josh Stebbins later from our environmental law program. We're prepared to meet the challenge of this moment and over the next 4 years. Authoritarians depend upon despair and fatigue and what's been called preemptive compliance, Jeff Bezos. And defiance and collective action is how we're going to meet this moment. And we also have to take care of ourselves to ensure that we can then take care of the planet, that we're prepared for the fight ahead of us. So with that, I'm going to get out of the way and I'm going to hand it over to our executive director, Ben Jalis. Ben.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you for all you do in leading the team at Sierra Magazine. Good evening, everybody. This isn't the conversation that we were hoping to have tonight. I hope everybody will take a moment the next 7 days, maybe over this long weekend, get out on the trail, get out on the water, and just feel deeply the disappointment, feel deeply the loss of all the possibilities. And then as my father, civil rights and environmental activist in his own right, advised me when I was young and still does, give yourself a finite amount of time to feel those feelings. Get up the next day and get right back to work. Reality is we have a lot to be grateful for right now. We have a lot to be grateful for the camaraderie of our fellow volunteers and organizers, staff members, attorneys, all of us in this movement together. We have a lot to be grateful for all the great work we did, all the postcards we sent, all the doors we knocked on, trying to make sure that the presidency went the right way. And we have a lot to be grateful for and all the other victories that all the victories that we won. And there were some big ones last night, but we also lost the presidency. And a lot of us were hoping for 12 years. We got 4. The reality is that it's reasonable to predict that we're headed into tough times. And yet we know that we can triumph even in tough times. Why? Because we've done so before. Sierra Club was made for moments like this. Sierra Club is an organization that has even survived, triumphed through moments tougher than this. Think about all this country has gone through in the last 120 years. We've had presidents like Woodrow Wilson as a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And yet, the last time Donald Trump was in office, we've got a great playbook from then. We filed more than 300 lawsuits against him. We exposed the corruption of his appointees and even stopped some key ones. We came together across the aisle, formed a bipartisan coalition to pass the Great American Outdoors Act. And we actually succeeded in the 4 years of Donald Trump's first presidency in shutting down more coal-fired power plants than we'd done in the 4 years before that. We built momentum, in other words. Why? Because we're strong. Why? Because of each of you, of all of us, of everybody who gives their time, their talent, their treasure to the great movement that is the Sierra Club and the broader environmental movement, the broader movement for justice in this country. Right now, our federal policy team, who you'll hear from, is gearing up for a big fight in this lame duck session, for pushing Vice President Kamala Harris and President Biden to do everything they can to protect more lands, to move the ball forward in the weeks that they have left. Our state legislative team is gearing up to make big progress in some states and fight big incursions in other states. We know it's going to be a tough session, and yet we know there's a big states where there are governors who are environmentalists, where both houses are controlled by people who believe in our cause, and we will get big things done. Our legal team you'll hear from tonight. Like you said, they were very active the last time Trump was in office. They're gearing up for more of that, including, again, helping us make progress and shutting down even more coal-fired power plants. Our field team is getting ready to respond again and again, along with comms and digital. We have all kinds of activists out there on the streets and in the ether of the web, and we will be activating all of them. Our political team is getting ready to adjust to this moment and to really build an even stronger political operation, and that's a lot for an organization that just endorsed more than 800 candidates across this country. And our operations team is working hard to take things to the next level. Now, looking forward, it's important that everybody in this call recognize that we are all leaders, that we will all be looked to by somebody for direction, for clarity about where do we go from here. And the reality is that all of us have to take a moment to just really hear the working people of the country last night who made it clear that they will vote their pocketbook. A neighbor out here who made it very clear to me he didn't agree with Donald Trump on much, but man, groceries were cheaper. And that's what guided his vote. And there were a lot of folks who voted like that last night. And the reality is that as an environmentalist in this century, we have a lot to offer the working people of this country as far as clear path towards better jobs, bringing back U.S. manufacturing to build things like EVs and solar panels and wind turbines and batteries, chips. In other words, we've been out here, my 50 years in this club since I came in as a little kid, the chapter that Ansel Adams helped found, the Ventana chapter. We've been talking for a long time, a better way is coming. Well, it is here. And we, as environmentalists, it's important that we recognize where the bulk of the country is. And we meet them where they are. And we talk about all we are doing to build more jobs, to create better jobs, to launch new industries in this country, and everything we're doing to clean up the air. Yes, because we're trying to save the planet, but also because it'll make the air that they breathe cleaner and prevent asthma attacks and heart attacks and unnecessary deaths. So I would say to all of us, yes, feel the loss. Also recognize the other victories last night. And more than anything, recognize that there are people looking up to you, people looking at you for leadership in this moment. And if they don't know what to do, I would say tell them this. As the fossil fuel industry has a lot of power and its money. It is always a battle in this country between organized people and organized money. And organized people can always win in a democracy, but they must be organized. And so if you have friends who are feeling a bit lost, encourage them to join the club, encourage them to join their group, to join their chapter, to get re-engaged, to get involved. And if they don't want to join the club, encourage them to join something else. Because the reality is that we can win, but we must be organized. And we will win through these times because we want big many times. Yes, there were some defeats, but we also won big many times the last time Donald Trump was in office, because we're just that strong together. Jason, back to you.
Ben, thank you so much for that. Ben was talking about how, this really is a leaderful organization and how all of you are leaders. And when I see all of you putting your names and your comments in the chat, you can see how the Sierra Club is everywhere, that we've got chapters in all 50 states, 62 chapters, including in Puerto Rico. And really, this is an organization of organizers. So please, I just want to encourage people, please do keep dropping those comments into the chat, and we'll get to them as many as possible. We're going to pivot now to Sarah Burton. She's our National Political Director, and she's going to talk about some of the perhaps silver linings of this otherwise grim day that you might not know about, and how Sierra Club was not just working on the presidential race and obviously marquee Senate races, but was working across the country up and down the ballot. So Sarah, why don't you share with us what good news you might have to share?
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Hi, Sarah Burton, National Political Director, talking to you all here from Northern Virginia. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I know that people are reeling and feeling a variety of emotions tonight. Many of you worked on this election. Many of you volunteered your time. We are living in complex, complicated times, and we will be analyzing the results of this election well into the future. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we know today. What we know today is based on voter surveys, exit polls, looking at vote margins, and looking at turnout in various districts. Those methods have flaws, but nonetheless can allow us to draw some conclusions, which I will get to in a minute. The voter file, which is the record of every voter and whether they voted, will be updated over the coming weeks. That takes some time, but once that has happened, we will have a more accurate demographic information that will tell us who turned out, what geographies turned out, what age groups turned out, all the demographics, so we can be really precise. At the root, Trump overperformed and Harris underperformed. He improved his margins in all kinds of districts, rural, urban, swing districts, red districts. Harris was not able to get the margin she needed. She underperformed Biden, and she didn't get that forecasted boost from women voters. Late deciders optimistically expected to go to Harris, ended up going to Trump. Early indications show that Trump improved his performance with various demographic groups, including Black men, greatly improved his performance with Latinos. This is according to exit polls. This is true even in communities with large Puerto Rican populations, like in Florida, in Texas, despite the comments he made last week. So what are voters telling us? Why did voters make this decision? Like Ben said, the economy was the driving issue that we're hearing over and over. People believe that Trump is better on the economy, and Harris's economic message did not resonate with people. Every cycle where there is a majority of voters who say, I think the country is heading in the wrong direction, we see a change of power. That was true this time. So we did lose control of the Senate. The House results will take some time to know. These are really tight races. It could take days. It might even take weeks. There are right now 40 seats still to be called. Whichever party wins the House is going to have a slim majority there. But like Jason said, there are some bright spots, several things to celebrate and highlight. So I'm going to just run through a few of those. And there will be more to come over the weeks as more races get called. In New York, we flipped 4 must-win critical House races. This started in February with a special election. All of these candidates were Sierra Club endorsed and had Sierra Club volunteers embedded into their campaigns. We elected 2 Black women senators in Maryland and in Delaware, the first trans member of Congress in Delaware, and the first Korean American senator in New Jersey, all Sierra Club endorsed candidates. Michigan held the state Supreme Court and ended up adding a seat to their majority. North Carolina elected Josh Stein as governor and broke the GOP supermajority there. Dems have flipped at least 15 seats in the assembly in Wisconsin. And in Washington, voters rejected a ballot measure that would have repealed the Climate Commitment Act, which requires polluters to pay into a fund to combat their carbon emissions. And another bad initiative there is still too close to call on gas. And across the states, voters enshrined rights to access to abortion. More importantly, the brightest silver lining of all, we stepped up. Sierra Club Independent Action volunteers wrote over 240,000 letters. They did 1,198 phone shifts. Our coordinated program did an additional 13,000 letters, as well as calls and texts. Our chapters across the country plugged hundreds of volunteers into endorsed candidate campaigns. We made calls, we knocked on doors. All of this activity made a difference, whether or not that particular election was won. These conversations with voters, with volunteers, set the groundwork for coming back, talking about future fights, strengthened our volunteer base for the work that is to come. So I will leave you tonight with this thought. Despite the heaviness of the results, there are so many more ways to assert your political power outside of federal elections. Local and state elections are even more important now to continue to move our work forward. And next year, if you're looking for something to do, there are thousands and thousands of races on the ballot across the country, from Virginia, where I live, to New Jersey, state legislatures, to county commissioners, PSC races, to school boards. Excuse me, Sierra Club will be there. Like Jason said, we cannot give in to the impulse to give up, to give in to despair. That is how authoritarians win. There is literally nothing they want more than for people to give up to make it easy for them to take more power. We have to continue to fight. Collective action makes us too big to stop.
Thanks so much for that, Sarah. And I know that I really appreciate it, and hopefully the people did in the chat as well, and everybody listening tonight. Just those reports from the hustings and the races that people might not have known about. Here in Washington, I know that I and my friends and neighbors are thrilled that Proposition 2117 went down so badly, and we defended our best in the nation climate law, which is a really important reminder, right, that we live in a federal republic with all sorts of layers of government, from cities to counties to states, and that there's all sorts of other ways to flex our power and to push progressive social change and to advance environmental priorities. During the first Trump administration, there was tons of action at the local level, as well as corporate campaigns targeting banks and targeting oil and gas companies. So I want to hand it over to Phil Radford. He's our Chief Strategy Officer. And Phil, I want you to share with folks some of the other avenues that are available for action, even with a Trump presidency.
Thanks, Jason. I saw in the chat somebody asked how many people we have, and we have 6,000 plus people that have registered for this. And so thank you all for being here. It's really incredible. Really good to have you here. Really good to be with you here. My name is Phil Radford. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at the Sierra Club. And a couple things. I want to reinforce a few things that Ben said first, which is really that we have been in this position before. When President Trump was first elected, our legal team, which you'll hear more from, sued the government 300 times, protecting a lot of the critical environmental laws and rules that we all rely on. The Trump administration did roll back some of the rules that we had passed to protect kids' health, to protect our air, and we turned right back 4 years later and passed those rules, working to strengthen them. And there's no reason to think that we can't do that again if some of the rules are rolled back. So my background, I come out of work on the environment in the west side of Chicago, where as a kid, I organized to help shut waste incinerators and have done a lot of different work, ran Greenpeace for about 5 years. And the reason I came to the Sierra Club is because I wanted to be a part of something bigger. And I think you get it, right? If you look at the Sierra Club, this is the organization that saved the Grand Canyon. This is the organization that passed the National Forest Service system. And when they weren't doing enough to protect our wilderness, created the National Park System to protect it even more, right? This is the organization that, with a combination of volunteer leaders, chapters, lawyers, just a bunch of incredible people, has shut down more than 300 coal plants and replace those plants with clean energy. And this year alone, the government just told us that the clean energy laws that we have passed and the clean energy that has been birthed out of replacing coal with clean energy created an additional 150,000 jobs in the last year alone. So a lot of the work that we do is just huge, right? Creating the next industries that are creating all the jobs in the country. And it's hard to imagine doing that anywhere else. The fact of the matter is, I think we're all here tonight because now more than ever, it's just so important to be with each other and to be a part of something bigger, because it'll take collective action to make progress. So in general, I think the reason that the Sierra Club has such an ability to make such a large impact is because we're everywhere. So many of you, I saw Morgan from our Angeles chapter. I saw a bunch of different people from Sierra Club's chapters. We have chapters and volunteer leaders and lobbyists in every state. There are very few organizations that can do that. Sarah mentioned and Ben mentioned, we have volunteers in chapters and groups in counties, in states that endorse more than 800 candidates this election cycle and that work to get out the vote all over the country. There is no other group endorsing over 800 candidates across the country on the environment. And we have 45 attorneys ready to litigate, to sue, to enforce all the laws, and to push things forward state by state. And I think the most important thing is that Sierra Club was started by volunteers, right? Committed people with great talent, great knowledge, exceptional grit, who have started Sierra Club in California, spread it across the country, and every day roll up their sleeves in City Hall, in the county council to protect our environment. So there is really no place that we can't go and adapt to continue to push forward while we fight back in Congress, while we fight back nationally, while we litigate in the courts to protect everything that we've fought so hard to win. I just want to thank you all for being here, because I wish we could turn the camera on you all so you could see the Sierra Club, so that you could see what makes this so powerful and our work so powerful. And I want to, if you're not a member of a chapter, or if you are not a volunteer with a chapter, I think we're going to flash a link up on the screen where you can find your chapter, because coming together with people in your community right now, we just need to come together and be together, because there's a lot to process. And B, it's going to be grassroots organizing that's going to turn the tide. So we need you involved. The second thing, you'll hear more from Josh, but unfortunately lawsuits aren't free. And so we'll also put another link in, because we need your help to push back. We really need your help. And so we would love it if you don't have the time to volunteer in your chapter, or you do, and you have $20 a month that you could set aside so that we can resist collectively. That would be incredibly appreciated as well. Thank you all for joining. Really good to see you all. I do wish we could turn the camera on you so you could see how many of you there are and who the Sierra Club is. We need you all. Let's do this.
Thank you for sharing all that, Phil. And thank you especially for sharing that background of your history as a young organizer there in Chicago, fighting a waste incineration plant. I know all of us have got to some degree a story like that, how we came into the movement. And obviously it's never too late, as Phil was saying, like, find your local chapter, find your group, find the ways to get involved. We're going to hear in a second about the importance of going on offense and what our environmental law program can do. But first, I think we should recognize that we are going to be playing defense for at least a couple of years in this next administration. So I want to hand it over to Melinda Pierce. She's our National Legislative Director, and she's going to, among other things, though, I'd love to hear Melinda, like, clearly one thing that's like the target right on its back is the landmark Inflation Reduction Act and all of the provisions in there that are accelerating the clean energy economy. So I'd love to hear from you. What can we do to defend the IRA, and what are some, I think, important defensive techniques we got to do for the next couple of years?
You bet. Thanks, Jason. I'm happy to do a bit of a dive on likely Trump administration attacks and impacts on our work, and definitely use the Inflation Reduction Act to talk about how we can fight those attacks and really defend the historic progress we all made together over the last 4 years. And hopefully it elicits some thinking amongst all of us as to how we can fight the Trump rollbacks on all of our energy and conservation campaign priorities across the board. And so I have the happy news to say there's no sugar coating it. We know that our climate and clean energy agenda is square in Trump's sights. We can read it in the blueprint laid out on Project 2025. And Trump's made it clear in his own words. He villainizes EVs. He says he hates, quote unquote, windmills, which can cause cancer. And he's railed against large solar installations. So he's coming after that. He's also called for a return to the good old days, drill, baby, drill. And in last night's speech, if you stayed up to watch it, he spoke specifically about the need to exploit America's abundance of oil and return America to energy domination. Trump also pledged to reverse Biden's pause on new LNG export facilities on day one. And he has a target trained on DOE, Department of Energy. He wants to eliminate the Loan Program Office. He wants to slash the Renewables Office. And he wants to halt appliance efficiency standards. You've seen his shower heads and toilet comments. But finally, Trump has labeled the Inflation Reduction Act as Biden's Green New Scam. And he vowed that he's going to reprogram that funds. We fought so hard for those historic investments. We are not going back. The IRA is the key battleground to fight back and to continue to make progress. So what are we going to do? In the near term, we'll continue to push Biden and the numerous agencies to work double time to push out these IRA investments, such as those for clean ports, transportation, clean energy, clean manufacturing, resilience funding for communities. And then we're going to have to defend those programs as they move into the states in 2025. The good news is many of Trump's threats can't be erased by the mere stroke of a pen. And many of these IRA programs, like clean school buses, for example, are extremely popular. Everybody likes free money, and many in Congress are going to be reluctant to turn their back on those funds or to vote to support stripping those funding. And we're going to have to exploit that. In fact, 18 Republicans signed a letter to Speaker Mike Johnson saying don't slash the IRA tax credits. So we do have some purchase here to defend the tax credits, the grants, the programs, even under Trump. So in other cases, the IRA money is already out the door, even though we're not seeing it implemented yet. It can't be clawed back. So for example, the work we're doing with Solar for All, that's $7 billion that has been awarded, and now states will have to begin to roll out that program in 2025. Once implemented, Solar for All is going to ensure that 900,000 households will have distributed solar. We've been frustrated at the pace that money has gone out, but it's allocated and it's going to be implemented, and our folks on the ground are going to help do that. Another IRA program that I want to lift up is the Home Energy Rebate Program. That supports energy efficiency home improvements. It too is popular. Only one state, South Dakota, has said no to the funding. And so far, 10 states have rolled out those programs, and those rebate programs are up and running. Another 9 have submitted the applications, but we haven't seen the Biden administration act on it. So in the near term, our chapters and grassroots have to push some of those laggard states to submit their plans for these home energy rebates. And inside the Beltway, we're going to push the Biden administration in the next 10 weeks to swiftly approve the plans in the pipeline. And we'll continue to work, finally, in 2025 to lobby those state agencies to get those programs money out the door. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Our charge with the IRA is right now to push the Biden administration, as I said, to get all that money out the door in the next 10 weeks. And we want to make it as hard as possible for a new Trump administration to claw back those funds. And then some of the work that we probably didn't do well in 2024. We need to do a better job in the states to extol the real world benefits of those programs to consumers and to communities. And we need activists across the country to help spread that. Because here's the thing, if you map out where most of the benefit of the IRA monies landed, Democrats delivered those programs, but Trump increased his margin in most of those places. That's in red states and in blue states. And this is perplexing. And we're going to have to figure it out. And we certainly don't have all the answers. And we do need probably to benefit from everyone's thoughts. We are all a little bit wiser this morning. And I think the way we use that wisdom will inform how we move forward in our important work to defend our progress, to push forward, even under a Trump administration.
Wow, thank you for that, Melinda. That is some hard-nosed realism, folks. I mean, Melinda's not just like giving you a shiny story here. Like those are real facts from on the ground from Capitol Hill, and really, I think, laying out a picture to make sure that we make the best use of these next 10 weeks, certainly during the lame duck period. We're going to get to Josh, our last speaker, in a minute. We've got about a half hour left. I do want to encourage people to keep putting questions into the chat. I love seeing all the activity there. I am just, as the referee, going to briefly say, keep it clean, folks. This is a big tent organization, and I love to see and hear members debate and disagree. That's what we're about. But let's just keep it clean, folks, in the comments there, and keep it respectful. So Josh Stebbins in our environmental law program. Earlier, Ben talked about the 300 some, I think he said, lawsuits that we filed during the Trump administration. I'd love it if you could talk about what the environmental law program here at the Sierra Club is going to be doing to defend bedrock environmental laws and also to hold the administration accountable for any excesses, overreaches, or, of course, violations of the law.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I'm Josh Stebbins, managing attorney in Sierra Club's Washington, D.C. office. Those 300 lawsuits that we filed last time around, they covered everything from Clean Air Act rollbacks to Clean Water Act rollbacks to fossil fuel permits. We weren't shy. We were aggressive. And we really did beat back Trump's efforts to roll back our bedrock environmental protections. We didn't act alone in doing this. We were highly strategic. We worked well with coalition partners, and we really expanded the type of coalition partners that we worked with. Sierra Club was a lead player in reaching out to blue state attorneys general to identify key cases and enlist their engagement to intervene in those cases and coordinate on litigation. Some of those cases were some of the most prominent successes in stopping the Trump administration's efforts to undermine our environmental protections the first time around. In addition to that, we mounted a massive FOIA operation that was core to highlighting and uncovering the scandals of the Trump cabinet in the first administration. Many people might recall when EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt resigned in disgrace in 2018, a huge number of scandals that came out in the press. Those scandals were uncovered through our attorneys, our FOIAs, our FOIA litigation. In addition, Trump's efforts to staff his cabinet with fossil fuel executives and lobbyists was a key area for our engagement. We did a lot of research into their past positions, and we were able to hold those nominations accountable and to thwart some of the worst nominations that were out there. But it wasn't all defense. We've been here. We know what to do to defend the progress we've made. And just as importantly, we know how to continue our work and to advance our work, under a Trump administration over the next 4 years. One key thing that we did was the law program, working with the campaigns and the chapters, pivoted to state level advocacy. We mounted novel state environmental legal campaigns to advance building electrification, transportation decarbonization, grid decarbonization, environmental justice initiatives. And those successes at the state level translated into our ability to then be much more effective and efficient when the Biden administration came in to launch those to launch similar legal campaigns at the federal level. So in the end, we're going to do what we know how to do. We know how to succeed. We are going to defend our core bedrock environmental protections, and we are going to defend the rule of law. And we look forward to working with many of our volunteers. Volunteers for the litigation are critical. They help identify standing. They help identify cases that we can bring. So we're looking forward to the next 4 years and to having the strength of our community working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you for that also really encouraging dispatch. I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank Melinda and Phil and Sarah and Ben and Josh for sharing really these messages of hope. I don't think anybody's trying to cloak what a hard day this has been, what a hard night it's been. And still, I love seeing the comments from you all in the chat, really taking a dose of encouragement from these folks. And hopefully this panel tonight can be a little bit of a human antidepressant. We're going to get to the questions in a minute. I do want to remind folks, and if the back end studio producers could put up the links so that people can find out ways to fight back. People can find out ways to donate and keep all this work going, as well as how to get involved in your local chapter. I think one question here, and maybe Ben, you can take this because I know this is a passion of yours and you talked about it. But what are our plans for reaching out to more diverse groups for engagement and action? And I think I don't know what the questioner's asking, but I think we're not just talking about racial, ethnic diversity, but also class diversity. I mean, that's clearly a big takeaway from this election. So how can we make this Big Tent organization even bigger? Can folks hear Ben? Oh, Ben, you might be muted. While Ben works on technical stuff, we talked about Project 2025.
Jason, I'm back. Can you hear me?
There we go. We got you.
All right. So, first place we start is we have to recognize that our agenda, our issues, our movement is more popular than either party or President Trump himself. Not only are most Democrats environmentalists, but fully 25% of Republicans consider themselves to be. And so we have to be committed to really reaching out to everybody who agrees with what we're trying to achieve and pulling them in to this movement. The point you said, is absolutely right. The biggest line limiting us, maybe what I call the Prius line. If you can't afford a Prius, the chances that you're active in an environmental group are pretty low, and it shouldn't be that way because we have a lot to offer working class communities about better jobs, new industries, better health. It also requires us to be disciplined enough to meet people where they are and start there. Start about their concern over their child's asthma. It shouldn't be this hard to breathe. Talk about their desire to see more jobs come to their community. Look at Dalton, Georgia, where they had the highest unemployment during the they have the highest unemployment during COVID, 47%. Community that's the capital of carpet production. There weren't great carpets being produced during COVID. And now they are home to what's about to be the largest solar panel production facility, the entire Western Hemisphere. At the same time, we need to recognize that there's a real need in this green movement for us to reach out across racial and ethnic lines. I've done a lot of work there when I've founded the climate justice program of the NAACP 15 years ago. And when you travel to our groups and chapters, you see a lot of NAACP activists who are also Sierra Club activists. One of the things that we're working on right now is a Sierra Club network strategy. And we've already begun talking to denominational leaders, including leaders of large Black denominations and other groups, about starting Sierra networks in their congregations. And there's a lot of excitement there. And so I think on class lines, on party lines, and across racial lines, there's a great future for expanding the club and the movement. And all we had to do is look back 30 years ago when 80% of the country considered themselves to be to be part of our green movement. I'm stuttering a bit tonight. A little tired, didn't get much sleep last night. But the reality is that our country has seen a time when most of the country saw themselves as part of our movement, and I believe we can get there again.
Thanks for that, Ben. Thank you for answering that question. I guess I do just want to underscore something you said. I mean, I think it's actually just a survey that's a couple years old from, I think, Ohio State, shows that something like 75% of Americans, which is like a huge number, all support the goals of the Endangered Species Act, right? I mean, a lot of our issues are really bread and butter issues. People love wilderness. They love going outdoors. They love fishing and hunting and exploring and rock climbing in different ways. Like a lot of those things transcend partisanship and show our huge base. And I can see that in the chat with some people asking questions either about wildlife or lands and waters protection. So Phil, we do have a question. I think this is probably for you about how we're going to continue our 30 by 30 campaign, our effort to protect 30% of lands and waters in the U.S. by 2030, and how we see that playing out in a Trump administration.
So much of conservation work is local, right? Usually, if land is protected through Congress, it's because the local congressperson first said, I want to protect this land, or a local community first said, we want this land protected. And that way, it's always been very bipartisan, and it's always been, if the member of Congress wants to protect that area, other people defer to that member of Congress. Much of the protected land in the United States is protected by states, right? And so we have about 12% of the land protected in our national park system, but a lot is protected state by state, and so much of it is local. And so, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, because the people in this country that have worked locally to protect land that's become a monument, become a state park, become a national park, are actually on this video, many of them. And so much of it is going local, always going local. And so, if President Trump decides, like he did in the past, to roll back some land protections, we will be working state by state to protect lands at the state level, the county level, the city level, and be ready once President Trump is out to push to restore all the protected lands and then move forward with even more. And, our country's struggle to protect our environment has been several steps forward, one step back, several steps forwards, one step back. We may very well take a step back or so with federal lands under President Trump, but we will be in every state working to protect more and be ready for the opportunity to restore any lands that have been unprotected and protect even more.
Since we're talking about lands, we talked a little bit about the lame duck, and I think Melinda gave a really good rundown of the things that the Biden-Harris administration can do during the lame duck to get more IRA money out the door. But what else might be on the table in terms of old school conservation, like designated national monuments? Maybe you could run through some of the things that kind of fit in the lands, waters, and wildlife bucket, and what might be on the Sierra Club's national monument wish list.
Sure, you bet. And we've been calling it sort of YOLO Joe. You only live once, Joe. Got to help us get the job done. Specifically thinking about our conservation agenda, obviously national monuments is something that is exclusively in Biden's purview. And we have been working very hard to queue up and work with communities to sort of set the table on some of these landscapes, whether it is some of the cultural and historic national monuments like we saw in Springfield commemorating the race riots. We're working very hard to ensure that Biden looks very carefully and designates the Tulsa Black Wall Street National Monument, working very closely with Dr. Crutcher and the community there in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Also at some of the larger landscape national monuments in places like the Gila or the Owahis. So obviously, national monuments is traditionally something the president does in his last days. And as the Sierra Club, we're pushing to make sure he is as bold as he can be on that, on national monuments specifically. One other thing I want to mention is another thing that Biden is on the hook for is finishing up the study, the public interest determination on whether increased liquid natural gas LNG exports are in the public's interest, and with climate and environment, and we need them to finish that study, and we want to use that public interest determination to oppose some of these specific LNG export facilities that are on the docket, specifically CP2. So there's a wide range of things that the president can do and will be pushing for the next 10 weeks, but those national monuments and LNG exports is something we are focused on.
Thank you, Melinda, for mentioning the LNG exports. And for those of you on the call, and I hope it's many of you already who are Sierra Club members, in the next issue of Sierra Magazine, we've got a big investigation all about those LNG exports in the Gulf. And it is truly horrendous, not only what it's doing to those communities down there in Texas and Louisiana, but also the impact it'll have on the whole global climate. I don't know who wants to tackle this next one, but it's come up a couple of times in the chat. And then I see it also in our background doc here about what the Sierra Club does to cooperate and collaborate with other organizations. A couple of people have asked us, like, do we work with Earth Justice? Maybe Josh can handle that, but maybe Phil or Ben, do one of you want to tackle just what the Sierra Club does as part of just one node in a larger sort of ecosystem of an environmental movement and a social movement?
Phil, go ahead if you want to hop in.
Sure. I don't think there is any victory that doesn't require an entire community to push forward. I think we at the national level, we are constantly working with allies anywhere from the American Lung Association to Natural Resources Defense Council to Earth Justice, a whole range of groups. It's too long of a list to mention. We coordinate our strategy for federal rules, for federal laws, with about 20 different groups consistently. We split up work. We, at the state level and at the local level, we are constantly in coalition meetings, coordinating the strategy, sharing information, and just dividing up work. I think there are a lot of really exceptional groups out there, and I think groups have done generally a very good job at focusing on what they're best at and working in a complementary way together so that we collectively win. I think what can make Sierra Club really unique is that we have a lot of the tools that we can use like an orchestra in a way, where some groups specialize in just one tool, whether it's litigation, whether it's just lobbying, whether it's just doing direct action. The amazing thing about Sierra Club, and which I mentioned before about wanting to be part of something bigger, is that Sierra Club has the attorneys, has Melinda's amazing team doing federal policy, has 50 chapters in every state, plus Puerto Rico, plus Washington, D.C., more than 50 chapters, but has chapters in every state, just has the ability to be in every state house, every governor's mansion, every courtroom, any election, really, endorsing over 800 candidates. And that ability to bring all of that to bear helps Sierra Club be incredibly flexible and strategic to make the biggest impact possible. And even with all those tools that you all make possible, we still have to work in partnership because no organization can do it all.
And I would co-sign everything Phil said, and also add that we work very well, and we've worked for a long time with tribes, the work with the Lummi with the Nez Perce right now and bringing down the dams on the Snake and the Columbia rivers with the Gwich'in to defend the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge with the Bad River Band on Line 5. Just for a few examples, our groups on the ground, our chapters on the ground work very well with the environmental justice community, and we do at the national level as well. And we also have understood for a long time that there's a lot of fossil fuel money behind these attacks on voting rights, and that folks are going after black voters and brown voters in part because that's been a big part of our base for a long time. As Van Jones would say, there is no green vote without the black and brown vote. And I'm very proud that Sierra Club has for more than a decade also been a good ally in the fight to defend voting rights.
So speaking of voting, I do want to remind something. I want to kick it back over to Sarah Burton because we've not had her here for a second, that this is a post-election briefing. And while we just got through a pretty rough one, there are still other opportunities. So Sarah, could you kind of give us a reminder of what the state of play is between now? Because it's not just, we're not waiting until 2028, right? There's a lot of work to be done before that.
There's a lot of work to be done before 2028. There's a lot of work to be done before 2026. There are elections next year up and down the ballot, most likely where you live. There are local elections that matter. There are state elections that matter, governor elections that are critical. You can get involved now. Our chapters will be evaluating candidates, will be assessing where they stand, looking at who are the decision makers around clean transportation in your city. Who are the decision makers around your utilities and how they get their power? And those are on the ballot. So I'm going to reiterate, get involved with your local chapter. We will be endorsing candidates and then helping those candidates get elected. And it's critically important. This is where our issues are going to move in the next year. So please get involved now.
Folks, I guess I want to hit a question that just came up about, this gets back to the state level stuff. What could people do who live in blue states as well as red states to make sure that their state is also helping to move climate progress forward in the absence of any federal leadership? We kind of hit that, but let's come back to this. I think it's really important. Phil or maybe Sarah, I don't know.
I would say connect with your chapter. Our chapters are really the expert. They're on the ground. They are passing amazing policies nonstop. They are working in coalition. They know their state legislatures. They know their governors. I think the most important thing is work with your chapter and your state because they're on the cutting edge. In blue states, passing the policies that other people copy, and in red states, doing incredible work across the aisle with farmers, with a whole range of communities to find really creative solutions to tackle the problems that we're facing. So connect with your chapter. They know what they're doing.
So again, want to thank everybody. We had thousands of people through the course of it on this conversation tonight. This is how we build power. Every relationship, every one-on-one is a unit of power. And the more that you multiply that, the more power we build. I want to have everybody here on the panel. This is our lightning round. We're just going to do 1 minute per person. Something you want folks to take with either an action you want them to take, or something that's giving you a glimmer of hope and the fire to carry on the resistance over the next 4 years. So we'll start with Sarah, and we'll go Sarah, Phil, Melinda, Josh, and then Ben will get the last word.
Get involved with your local chapter. I took the easy one, but that's the way.
Sarah took mine. What gives me hope is you all. It's really meaningful that on such a intense day, such a frightening day for so many people, you chose to come here, right? And you chose to be together. And this is how we're going to win. We have to stick together. We have to work together. We have to put in the hours. We have to put in the time. We have to take care of each other. And we could collectively together, we've turned the tide before. We can do it again. We just have to do it together. That gives me hope.
It's me. I think we can bite off some wins here. No reason to give up. We have folks need to remember we have 10 more weeks of the Biden administration and the YOLO Joe agenda. So pushing Biden to finish the job and to deliver on so many of the promises that he laid out on day one and week one. We've made a ton of progress, but let's make sure that we're squeezing the juice out of the lemon. And then, of course, in 2025, there are ways we can win. There are ways that we can throw sand in the gears. And there are ways that we will be cultivating champions, putting out marker bills and building for the future. And then as Phil had said as well, there's also progress we can make at the state and the local level. So there's a lot to do. I am not in despair.
We do Josh and then Ben for the closer.
Sure. What gives me hope? I woke up this morning after a very brief night of sleep, feeling extremely dispirited, like I'm sure many of you. I then spent my day more or less doing my round of calls and litigation planning with a slew of state chapters in red and blue and purple states. And in every single one of those states, there was a clear plan for how to move forward, not in response to to this election, but because we're already doing this work with the state chapter at the state level, and we're winning. I came away from that feeling like there were really concrete opportunities to make progress, to be engaged, to realize how big the field of play here is and how much of a meaningful impact I can have working with the state chapters. And I know that that's the same thing as the volunteers working with the state chapters, because we work with those volunteers.
Jason, I'd say three quick things. One, I choose to look at this country in decades and centuries. And when you do, what becomes clear is that things move in cycles. In the 20s of any century has always been pretty bad. By the time you get to the 70s of any century in the history of this country, it tends to be much better. Our job, the generations living right now, is to move this country from one place to the other. And then I look at what we achieved in the last decade when Donald Trump was in office. And we got a lot of good done. We even accelerated the rate of closing down coal-fired power plants. And now we've shut down almost 3/4 of them. And we will see the end of that. And we will see the rise of renewables. And when speaking, the third thing brings me to my third thing, which is that in the last 4 years, we have built an incredible amount of momentum because of the victory that we helped to deliver and even architect, that is the Inflation Reduction Act, which has opened up factories all across this country. And the reality is there's a lot of governors, including a lot of Republican governors, who are very invested in keeping that going. And I do believe that we will keep it going. And when you're in those factories, I think finally you see what is, I think, the greatest hope of this country in many ways, which is that we are getting back to doing something I haven't seen in my adult lifetime. And that is opening new factories to seize new big opportunities. You cannot explain the tough place America is in, the divided place we're in right now, without accounting for the 65,000 factories that have been shut down in the last 30 years. And when you walk into a place like the Q-Cells factory in Dalton, Georgia, and you look at the drawings on the walls of the kids whose parents worked there, and they were asked to portray their parents going to work every Earth Day, what those Crayola drawings, those water paintings show you is that all those kids, and what is the district that sends Marjorie Taylor Greene to Congress, all those kids, as diverse as Georgia itself, see their parents as heroes helping to save the planet. And the reality is those kids know that this Earth shot is critical. And those families know that seizing on that Earth shot is our best shot at building a real comeback for this country. And when you look at those kids' photos, you also realize that it's the path to healing this country, to get all boats rising again. Whatever Donald Trump does these next 4 years, we will outlast him. And in the end, we will win as we always do, because we are willing to fight to the end. That is the power of being part of a big movement institution like the Sierra Club, and also the school of fish that is the Sierra Club. We're not like many big whales. We are, 600 groups, 64 chapters, and literally millions of activists working together to make this country and this world better. We will keep doing it no matter who's president, and our track record shows that even when this one's in office, we can get a whole lot of good done. So let's go do it together.
Well, thank you, Ben, for those really inspiring words, for bringing that voice from the pulpit. Thank you, all of the people who joined tonight. I really wish we could do what Phil said and turn the camera around, see all of you all out there and the good work that you're doing. Again, as we've said a couple of times on this call, if you're not involved with your local Sierra Club chapter or group, get involved. It really is the best way. All politics is local. That's how we're building power from the ground up. So go to sc.org/chapters. You can also go to sc.org Fight Back, so we can keep you up to date on how to challenge the Trump administration's agenda. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We all know that today was an awful, terrible, no good, very bad day. But I don't know about you. I certainly am feeling more inspired and energized by this conversation. And as I want to wrap up, I just want to thank you again for joining. We're going to close. Keep up the great work. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and go safe.